Well, hello good people. You know, it's kind of funny to see Corsair's first ever 60% keyboard. I'm really happy they're in the market now. Not be called the K60 because they already have that. So it doesn't seem like they thought far ahead into the naming scheme. So this instead is the K65. Oh my god, almost dropped it. The 60% direction with Corsair is really important. It's competing with Ducky, with Razer, with Fanatic, and even though it's not my perfect size keyboard, like I prefer 65% and above, they're doing something new here. So let's check it out right after this.
Productivity is choosing to get things done on time, and finding the right tool for the right task is important. You want a display that's big enough to accommodate your content, but also color accurate to put a smile on your face. Build quality that defines exceptional craftsmanship, but also light enough to accommodate you during travel. Performance that speeds up your workflow with Intel's 11th Gen Core series processors, and the battery life that lasts you for an entire day thanks to Intel's Evo certification, along with flexible connectivity like Thunderbolt 4 and HDMI to expand your lifestyle. Meet the Razer Book 13, the ultimate productivity laptop.
Alright, so let's get the basics out of the way. The K65 RGB Mini is going to cost $110. That is right in line with the Ducky offerings for the One 2 Mini, and that is pretty awesome. For Corsair to be competing with Ducky, usually if you're wanting to find a Ducky keyboard, you have to go through specific channels, but Corsair has much wider reach in terms of mainstream, and I'm excited for people to actually get a hang and start to use these 60% keyboards more. And also price-wise, it is slightly cheaper than the Huntsman Mini, which is $119, so that gives Corsair another advantage here. Now in terms of design, Corsair has nailed a lot of aspects here. So first of all, double shot PBT keycaps, right? So that's fantastic, which feel incredible in terms of their strength and durability. So texture and keycaps are fantastic. Not a huge fan of the font in terms of the numbers. They're a little too ugly for me, but the actual font for the letters is perfectly fine with minimal imperfections, which is impressive because usually with double shot PBT keycaps, you are going to encounter those little black sections on the illumination parts, but here everything just shines right through without anything popping out. We have this really awesome design on the spacebar, and because of that, it is an ABS keycap, so slightly different feeling and texture versus everything else. But design-wise, I love the cohesion because it carries over from the ventilation pattern on their cases. Also because it's illuminated by a single switch, you can see that light just kind of fades away from the center. We also have a Corsair branded keycap that is also ABS if you want to replace an escape key or something. And if you want all double shot PBT keycaps on here, an extra spacebar is included that you can swap out, which is appreciated. Also because of the 60% layout, all the secondary functions are built in around the keyboard, but I've noticed that like the arrow keys, for example, are slightly offset. They're not identical to the layout to what we see with Ducky, but it's really cool to see your media controls, your mouse navigation, macros, and your page up, page down, all those keys, and of course your F keys at the top. They are all activated with the function and the function 2 keys, which are right beside each other, and after a while it becomes second nature. You know exactly where to go for your arrow keys, for your page up, page down, and your F keys as well. Nice and straightforward. Now, if you are skeptical or hesitant about a 60% keyboard, let's say a TKL keyboard is too big for you, then a 60% form factor is probably the right choice. You do lose out on the dedicated arrow keys, your page up, page down, delete keys, and the dedicated F keys, but it's a fantastic complement to notebook users and Eber, apparently, who loves his 60%er.
To be honest with you, I think at the end of the day, what I really love about this keyboard is its form factor, because it's so compact that it gives you so much room around your desk to place other things on, because as you can see right now it's clean, but typically it's not because I have so much stuff on it.
But you know what? I would love to hear what Frank has to say about the 60% form factor, especially coming from Corsair.
So 60% gaming keyboards have been the trend recently, and as you can see here with the K65 Mini RGB. And that's really because when Ducky launched their One 2 Mini, that keyboard exploded on the scene. A lot of gamers, a lot of streamers use that form factor because it's nice and compact on their desktop. Just the keys they need for gaming, all right there. You can still access those secondary functions with the function key, so you're not really missing out on those keys, unless you're someone like me, who does a lot of video editing and stuff on the side. Not for me necessarily, I'm more of a TKL guy myself, but that's why these compact keyboards have just exploded recently. My main gripe is, yeah, Corsair finally sort of caught up and put out this smaller form factor, just like a ton of other companies have over the past 12 months, but they're not really doing anything special that kind of separates them from the pack that would make the regular consumer pick this over other 60% keyboards out there. I just think they need to do something more, and this is a classic example of too little, too late, 100% pun intended. Thanks for Dimitri for having me on. I'm Random Frank P. Have a good day.
Now, design-wise, I'm very surprised they didn't try to pull a Corsair and try to, let's say, mimic a K70, but in a 60% form factor. Here, it's a very new, like almost unfamiliar territory in terms of keyboard designs to Corsair, but it does fit into the whole 60% category. So we have a Type-C connection at the center, at the back, with a USB-C cable included. I don't particularly like this cable because it's braided and kinks way too easily. I am surprised, however, at how little branding there is. So we have a Corsair logo in the top right that is facing away from the user, so you'll never see it. And we also have a very tiny font that has the K65 on the left side. I'm also surprised we don't have any height angle adjustments at the bottom, because the actual body of the keyboard is slightly chunkier than normal, and that helps to angle it in a very comfortable manner. But still, you do not have any angle adjustments, only those rubber feet that helps to secure the keyboard to the surface. My two complaints, however, when it comes to the physical exam are the edges of the keyboard right below the keycap. And they're not smooth, they have very sharp, like unrefined edge to them. And I like to rest my thumb right below the spacebar, and it's just uncomfortable. You can feel it, you can hear it, like plastic grinding against your fingertips. Is just not pleasant. And my second complaint is more visual. So the white plate underneath the keycaps, it's great because it helps to spread that illumination from the switches, but it's not as vibrant and full as we see with the Corsair packaging. So when you turn off the lights, you can see that the edges of the keyboard and the switches don't get that even spill illumination. So there are some dead zones when it comes to color spill around the edges. The rest of the illumination, by the way, is gorgeous. Absolutely no complaints here with the brightness and the color vibrancy and all the effects that are built into the iCUE, or the hardware lighting effects that you can switch with the function C on the keyboard itself if you don't have iCUE loaded, and I appreciate all that customization. Now let's talk about the switches. So they are not hot swappable, but they are available in three variants: MX Speed, MX Silent, and MX Reds. I have the MX Speed variant, and I remember that MX Speeds used to be my favorite switch of all time when I had the K70 RGB, the original one. Super fast, super smooth, super linear. But here, I mean, sure, they're fast actuation because the actuation point is very high at 1.2 millimeters, but they're not as smooth as I remember them. They have certain grindiness to them that I did not expect, especially after using keyboards like the Roccat Vulcan TKL Pro that has optical red switches, which feel so much smoother, and even using MX Brown switches on a Ducky keyboard just feels smoother in terms of like that travel than MX Speeds do. And that's kind of an issue. Also, it's fairly loud regardless if you bottom out or not. Take a listen. The stabilizers feel good, much better versus what Corsair has been delivering over the past few years, but there's certain pinging happening throughout the keyboard, especially when you bottom out hard. Not pleasant. Okay, so I hope you could hear the difference between other linear switches that feel smooth and are much quieter versus MX Speed. Like, I wouldn't have any issues gaming with this, but it wasn't what I was expecting when it comes to a linear fast gaming switch, especially because it's a bit too loud. But then let's talk about the big elephant in the room, and that is the Axon processor that is capable of 8000 Hz polling on the keyboard. So we have the Viper 8K from Razer already, and that I can see because mouse movement is very important, right? Like the The fact that it updates 8 times faster than your traditional 1000 Hz mouse is great for professional FPS gamers and who really want that precision and confidence in their aim. But when it comes to keyboards, that's when I'm not convinced. I don't know if 8000 Hz matters on a keyboard, especially when the keyboard switch is not optical, where the actuation isn't instantaneous. And when you're dealing with some form of debounce delay after the switch registration, I understood why it was there and why it's important on the K100 that has OPX optical switches, and we have the 4000 Hz polling rate that give you the confidence of like knowing that your keystrokes are being registered at all times. But pushing that boundary even further to 8000 Hz, I mean, what's next? As for performance penalties when using 8000 Hz, so CPU usage in my testing remains the same when I'm hammering on the keyboard, as you can see, between 1000 Hz and 8000 Hz, so CPU usage is basically identical. As for actual in-game testing, yes, I did experience a slight FPS drop when we are running at 8000 Hz versus 1000 Hz. Interesting that it's a consistent 3 FPS reduction both for the average and for the 99th percentile. This may vary depending on your system configuration, and Corsair does give you a warning when you switch into the 8000 Hz that you might end up using more resources for it. As for iCUE software, it's been completely overhauled, so the UI is now simplified for the better in terms of all your components that are visible up top here. And key assignments, this is pretty straightforward. You can select a key, you can remap it, you can create a macro, launch a program, do all that stuff. It's pretty straightforward. I love that we have also hardware key assignments, which means you can create all your macros and different profiles, and those will be running regardless if iCUE is installed on your computer. So it's great if you're traveling with this keyboard, and the same thing can be applied to the hardware lighting setting. In the lighting effects here, everything is layered. So you can create different things for your WASD stereo, create a different profile for the top. It's awesome. And we have these quick lighting zones. For example, if you just want WASD in red, everything else underneath in spiral rainbow, you know, it's kind of a cool way to customize lighting. I prefer this approach with layers instead of trying to select different keys, do that color and select everything around it and change that color. So layers is awesome. In the performance tab here, you can select what is disabled when the Windows lock is on, and also change the actual indicator color. So when you enable Windows lock, the Windows key goes into that specific color, which is awesome. For example, it's by default in the white space. So if you want everything else to be white, you can change the lock indicator so you know exactly when it is active. And it's cool because you can actually save these different profiles and in custom colors. If you select one that you love the most, the one that looks visually prettier on this keyboard, you can add them to the custom colors and use that later. And finally, we have device settings, in which we change probably the most important aspect or the most marketed aspect of this keyboard is the polling rate. So go from 1000 to 8000 and the keyboard will restart in doing so. Plus you can change the brightness of the illumination, and this is where your onboard memory is here. So you can select all your profiles and add more. All right, I hope you enjoyed. I'm really excited to see Corsair on track to release a proper 60% keyboard to compete in that whole space, competing with Ducky because of that price point, and especially competing with Razer or out-competing them because of that price. Again, in terms of the basic features for a 60% keyboard, everything is absolutely covered, and at 8000 Hz, even though I wouldn't consider it to be like the beneficial, it does outcompete everything else that's available in the market, and you just have to ask yourself if that's worth it. And also another thing is that how many people actually game with a 60% keyboard, and is 8000 Hz relevant, you know? So yeah, I'm Dmitry, thanks so much for watching. Check out this other relevant content right over here. Subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you in the next video.